It's June and I've started Vlogmas. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, I am Debbie B and I have got a brand new book for you. I finished listening to The Lucky Escape by Laura Jane Williams. This is an audiobook. So there's the front cover for you. And yeah, I'll just get on with that blurb, shall I? One cancelled wedding. When the day finally comes for Annie to marry Alexander, the last thing she expects is to be left standing at the altar. She was so sure he was Mr. Right. Now she has no idea how she could have got it so wrong. One unexpected encounter. After a chance meeting with Patrick, an old friend who reminds her of who she used to be, Annie takes a vow of her own. She'll say yes to every opportunity that comes her way from now on. One spare ticket for the honeymoon. Could a spontaneous trip with Patrick be the way to mend Annie's heart? She's about to find out as she embarks on her honeymoon with a man who is not her husband. This was incredibly cheesy, but I loved it. Its duration for the audiobook is 8 hours 48 minutes. I did speed up certain sections just because I process things very quickly, so at the normal pace it was just a bit slow for me, and only when I read I'm quite a quick reader as well, so I just sped it up a little bit. It's in general fiction, romance and contemporary, target audience adult. There are some kind of slightly sexual things in there, so I'd say kind of like an older teenager. This was read by Carrie Hope Fletcher. I've accidentally listened to a few audiobooks narrated by Carrie Hope Fletcher. It's been a bit of an accident. It was sweet, it was cheesy, and it's just what you need when you don't want to have to concentrate too much. I listened to a lot of this while I was driving to and from rehearsals for Legally Blonde, and I actually finished listening to this. I think it was on it was the day before the last show, so our shows were on the Saturday, and I think I finished listening to this on the Friday. So you meet Annie at the beginning, and you find out that Alexander's stood her up. The things you hear about the relationship throughout the book, you do wonder how she got it so wrong, because it says in the blurb she has no idea how she got it so wrong. The things you do find out about Alexander throughout the book, in the conversations with Patrick, you're just like, how? Why? And you realise that Annie kind of became a bit complacent in the relationship, in the idea that, oh, maybe no one else will have me. I've known this guy since I was college because they're college sweethearts. And the moment towards the end where she goes, yeah, you don't have to be with a college sweetheart, you know, you can grow and people do drift apart. And I'll admit the voice used for Alexander was very posh and pretentious, which made me not like him pretty much straight away. I think that when you listen to an audiobook, the way that people are categorised by their voice does affect the way that you see those characters. A Stranger in the House by Shari LaPena, there was one characterisation of a woman in that where I just thought the voice seemed a bit too sweet and very high pitched. I just thought, this feels like I'm being lulled into a false sense of security, and she's not going to be as sweet as that voice makes it appear. In regards to this book, you could tell certain things by that voice choice. I think it's one of those ones where you can pretty much see what's coming. The main kind of conflict in the book is between Annie and her mother. They have a very interesting relationship. Annie always feels like she's being kind of told off by her mum, and it's obviously that they've got slightly different love languages happening there. The way that her mother expresses her love for her daughter is very different than what you'd traditionally think of a mother-daughter relationship, which I come quite close with my mum. As I've gotten older, I've gotten to a point where I consider my mum a friend because we have lots in common and we can chat and we can gossip, and then I can still go to her for advice, whether that's as a friend or a mum. In this case, Annie's relationship with her mother is very distant and cold. So when I was listening to it, and I was just thinking, what is the main conflict here? I'd say that the main conflict is the relationship with her mother, and then things that happen with her job and how that affects her relationship. I mean, this book was very funny. There was one bit in particular that really, really had me howling with laughter as I was listening to it in the car. If anybody had seen me while I was driving, they probably thought I had completely lost it. But there's a bit when she's in Australia on her honeymoon without a husband, but with Patrick, who she knew when she was a kid, and she did like these drama camps, and then they meet again as adults and decide to go on the holiday together. But there's a point where they go to a spa and it's a couple's treatment, so they're in the same room and they can't get single treatment. They have to be together in this same room, so they try to figure out a way to be able to get on the bed without completely exposing each other to each other. And Patrick leaves the room so that Annie can get onto the bed. And then she calls out, ready, so that Patrick will come in. But the therapist comes in at the same time thinking that they're both ready. And Annie ends up falling onto the floor. It's just one big farce, this whole section. But it just had me crying with laughter because I just thought, it almost feels too real in that situation. It's like, it's ridiculous. But as somebody who works as a spa therapist, I can totally see something like that happening. But yeah, I just found that bit really, really funny. And I thought there was a really nice message about finding yourself, especially after a long-term relationship. I thought it was really cool to see Annie come into herself and stand up to Alexander when it comes to the point where she needs to have that conversation with him about what happened, because all she gets is a message from a friend, and was it a text message or an email from Alexander, and she never really gets an apology, to the point when she does actually stand up to him and says to him, you never apologised. And yeah, I went on this honeymoon without you, and yes, I have met somebody else, and yes, it might seem very quick, but actually after, 8 years? It's a long relationship that she had with Alexander, because she met him in college, and then you see her obviously as an adult, and then it's also proof that just because you know somebody for a really long time doesn't actually mean that you're destined to be together, and that you can meet somebody after a long-term relationship and it doesn't have to be that slow. Especially when you're in like late 20s, early 30s, you know what you want out of a relationship at that point. So even if you have just come out of a very long relationship, as in the case of Annie and Alexander, when she meets Patrick and she thinks, is this too quick to fall in love with somebody? When I might have been when I was a kid, I haven't seen him in years, and the fact that they've met again and decided to go on holiday together, and you know, you can see them together and you realise how much they have in common, and you realise they appreciate each other for who they are. They don't feel like they need to change for each other. So it is a very, very sweet message in there of reminding people that falling in love can happen at any time and there's no set timing for it, and you don't have to rush anything. And I think a lot of people kind of forget that sometimes. But yeah, it was just a really sweet, really cheesy, if you just want a bit of a chick flick to sit down with, this is the book for you. So that's The Lucky Escape by Laura Jane Williams. There you go. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time. Love you.